Being told to record, so welcome. Right, I'm actually going to get us back. We are going to use some neuroscience to jumpstart our stakeholder comms. That's the whole point of all of this. So let's give this a go, shall we? It's very practical. These webinars are always incredibly practical, and I'm going to ask you to join in by putting some stuff in the chat as you go. Let me know what your own thoughts are. Okay, so that's my plan. Let's get started. First of all, some sources. The sources for this are the two books that I've written, one of which is about to be published, The Neuroscience for Change at Work, and the other one is the Agile Change Management Handbook, and both of which form part of accredited courses. So they form the Agile Change Agent, Agile Change Coach, and the Neuroscience for Change courses. And I want to show you how Agile Change and neuroscience link together. And then I'm going to talk about why do we need to jumpstart our engagement. So what's going on? We're going to talk about threat and reward in the brain. So we're going to look at how brain views change as a threat. We're going to look at the relevance of neuroscience to engagement, to stakeholder engagement. And then I'm going to go through, I've got about 9 practical techniques. If I can zip through these, I will be very, very pleased, because I want to make this a practical teaching. Yes, it's free training, but I think it's important, because I think that upskilling ourselves in a fast-moving profession is what it's all about at the end of the day. So that's my plan. Okay, so let's get started. There are 3 qualifications, and the Agile Change Agent is great for setting out the roadmap of an Agile change, which is wave after wave after wave of change, and it helps you find the benefits. But particularly today, what you're going to find me talking about is the new qualification, which is Neuroscience for Change. Alongside Neuroscience for Change, we have the Agile Change Agent, the Agile Change Coach course as well. So what you'll find there's such a link between all of these, because the neuroscience is really going to explain how brain smart an agile approach is. The Agile Change Coach course is full of practical techniques driven by the whole point of neuroscience. So that's how all of this works together. It all hangs together. Okay, I've just got one more person joining, so I do apologise. I'm trying to get everybody on. I'll stop admitting people after this. So fitting these things together, agile, I didn't realise until I wrote the neuroscience book just how brain smart an agile approach is. That we talk a lot about working in smaller chunks and how we make that happen, but good grief, it really is absolutely brain smart. And you'll see from the 9 techniques I'm going to try and rattle through today why that is true. So I'm going to pull all that together for you and see if we can make a cohesive picture. So, first of all, let's talk about the brain. We've got to talk about what neuroscience is. We've got to talk about the brain. We can't have a sort of jump-starting our stakeholder engagement using neuroscience without understanding it. So neuroscience, very easily, is the study of how the nervous system develops, its structure, and what it does. So neuroscience focuses on the brain, its impact on behavior and our cognitive functions. Now, without getting too lectury, okay, the central nervous system is the brain and the spinal cord. I was actually in a hospital on Monday watching my spinal cord because I have a broken neck. And so there I was being irradiated. So I had loads of barium inside me and I was watching my own broken neck. It was a very disconcerting moment, I have to be honest and say. And then we have over here, we have what we call the peripheral nervous system. You think, good grief, this is all a load of words. Don't worry, we'll make it sensible for you. So what's happening here is we have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. So you've got your brain and you've got the spinal cord, but there's loads of nerves, aren't there, in the body that are picking up signals all of the time. And the sympathetic nervous system is all about fight or flight. It's picking up things and going, is this a threat or is this a reward? If it's a threat, I'm going to flood you with loads of adrenaline so you are ready to fight it or to fly away from it. Whereas, of course, if you see it as a reward, I'm going to flood you with lots of dopamine and make you feel really good. And then we have the parasympathetic nervous system, a sort of a crucial role, because what it's doing is sort of it's looking at how we feel. And ultimately, when it comes to change, this is the system that's looking very particularly at things like denial. And actually, I'm going to ignore it to protect my brain. I'm going to ignore this and I'm not going to get involved. What's happening when when we're thinking about how the brain works and we're thinking about these different systems is that the one thing we can be sure of is that the brain takes in far more information than we could ever process. We are picking up sight and smell. We are picking up touch. We are picking up what we can hear all of the time. And ultimately, what's happening is that our brain has to have filters. Now, this is what we're going to look at in terms of our jumpstarting our stakeholder engagement and how we deal with people, is we have to think about, well, how does the brain cope with all this extra information then? And that's what we're going to be having a think about today. So why do we need to jumpstart our stakeholder engagement? Well, the immediate thought from the brain is it's a threat. We think we're sending out really useful information about our change, our transformation. We carefully craft our messages, don't we? We pick out the right content that we think is relevant for our stakeholders. And actually, we are having unintended consequences, because what happens is people go, I'm too busy for this. There's too much happening here. No. Please don't ask me to get involved in this. I've got too much else going on. So we think we've carefully crafted a message, and somebody else is seeing that message and going, no, I'm too busy for that. Don't get me involved in that. So immediately we think we're being helpful, and we're actually creating that threat response where the brain is being flooded with the adrenaline, almost the fight back. Other times we need to jumpstart because actually people have, we've got, as I said, the brain is taking in far too many messages every day. So what it does is it filters things all the time. And now we call those filters bias. But actually what it is, it's a filter that says, based on my knowledge of past events, I don't need to get involved in this. This is irrelevant. This does not work for me. Or based on my understanding of past events, this is very relevant. I should take notice of this. So it might well be that our messages are being filtered out because somebody's going, no, don't need to be involved in that. It's not relevant to my job, or it's not relevant to what I'm doing right now. And I put on it there, this change is not relevant to my current workload, because that, I think, is the bias that's operating the most at the moment. Because what's happening is people are going, I'm just too busy. So we're back to the top one as well. The two are connected. Sometimes we get a bit of angry. How dare you impose more work on me? So you've sent an innocent message where you think you're being really helpful because you're sort of saying, oh, come on, let's get involved in this change. And you're giving people an opportunity. And actually they see it as yet more on their workload. And they're really angry. How dare you ask me to do that? Or, oh, if I keep my head down, this will disappear. I don't need to worry about this. It will disappear. We'll be absolutely fine. So I'm going to ignore the message, whatever it is, it's there. The whole thing. Or, oh, no, not again. Find someone else to help with your change. I'm far too busy. So there is an awful lot of filtering out at the moment to do with relevance, to do with busyness, to do with, I don't actually believe in this change. I don't think it's relevant because I don't think we're ever going to do it, or I don't think it's relevant to me because I don't think my world should be changing like that. So we absolutely need to cut through all of these filters, if you like. If we want to be heard, we're going to have to get past these filters. And of course, what's driving these filters is a recognition that the brain sees change as a threat, not as an opportunity. The brain is programmed very, very simply to avoid threats and to maximize reward. It's what the brain's there to do. So when it looks at something that's a threat, one of the easiest ways that our brain can deal with it is to ignore it. When it comes to an organizational threat like change, it's going to go, well, to protect myself from this threat, I'm not going to get involved at all. So what I want to do is just pull out some of the visceral responses that the brain has. You just can't stop your brain thinking like this, emoting like this when you see some of our communications about change. So let's put this into something straightforward, something we'd all recognize. So first of all, it's a threat to certainty. Our brains love certainty. Our brains cope with, I know what's going to happen next. If I know what's going to happen next, then I can build shortcuts. I can save precious time and energy. Actually, the brain is all about saving energy, because the brain recognizes that although it's a small proportion of our body weight, it uses a disproportionate amount of our oxygen. So it's very power hungry. So the brain very sensibly is always looking to cut the energy required to get anything done. And one of the quickest ways that we can cut the energy required is to go into habit mode. I know what to do. I know all of the steps in this process. I can find some shortcuts. I don't have to think about it consciously. I've done it so many times before. It's a habit. So I can sort of run this process subconsciously while I think about other things. I was certainly doing that this morning while I was trying to drink my tea whilst I answer my emails, whilst eat some blueberries. I was multitasking, as we think about it. Well, actually, I wasn't. My brain, multitasking is a fallacy, to be fair. What my brain was doing was switching very, very quickly from drinking tea to eating blueberries to answering my emails. But because I know my email system, I know all the people that are sending my emails, I know the things I want to say, I was in habit mode as I quickly responded to stuff. So if the brain thinks this is a threat to certainty, it's going, well, I don't know what's going to happen next. And again, my brain is protecting me from that potential threat. In the unknown, in the uncertain piece, that might be where my fears are lurking. It could be that I'm fearful that I'm asked to do something I don't think I'm very good at. Or maybe I'm fearful that I am going to have to do something where I work with people I don't like. Or maybe I'll have to do something that's very difficult or that I don't agree with. But my brain is going, this is a threat to certainty. A change is a threat to what I already know. That's why I don't want to get involved. Another visceral experience, other than certainty, is fairness. Our brains love to know that everything is equitable. We get very, very upset when we think that somebody else is getting something that we are not, that somebody is getting treated more fairly than we are not. If somebody's having an easier time at work, if somebody's getting more time off than we are, if somebody isn't having to stay late to get their work finished and we are, we get very, very angry. We see that as a disadvantage. The brain is always thinking, well, the person with the advantage is more in control. They have more power. You are at a disadvantage. So that's a threat to your survival. Right? It's always thinking about threat to survival. So if I see this change as an additional burden, I'm already imagining all of the additional work, the hours I'll have to put in. It's just, that's what a 3-year-old would say. And that's exactly what our brains are still saying. We might have got older, but it's don't want to. That's exactly what the brain is doing to protect ourselves from all of this hard work. That fairness comes out when I think about I'm going to lose my current ease of working. Work is going to be harder. So because we're going to be doing something new and different, I'm losing all my habits. So work's harder. It's not fair. I'm already tired and now it's going to get even harder to do it. That's not fair. I don't want this. But there's also a threat to my status because I'm losing my knowledge. So I become less special. Yeah. And that is a threat to the status I have within the tribe. Maybe I am respected for something. Maybe I'm the go-to person for something, but I feel good about that. And now suddenly, it's a case of, I'm not as good anymore. Maybe other people have come in with skills that really fit this change, and I'm no longer. And maybe I wasn't top of the tree, but I was quite well respected in the tribe. And now I've lost my position in the group membership. And the brain, very simply, talks about group membership as the way that we used to survive. So if we were living in our caves, there would be members of the group who were out hunting for food while we were resting, or while we rested, other people stayed awake to protect us from predators, and vice versa. So the tribe mentality, being part of a group, is really hardwired. And when we see a change that changes our position in the hierarchy, who I report to, who I work with, oh, that creates a really big threat as well. And then the last one that I thought I'd talk about is the threat to our autonomy. Again, self-choice is the protection mechanism. The brain recognizes that the brain that is going to protect us the most is ours. We are the people that are most interested in our survival. And so when I have to cede control to somebody else, then I'm putting myself at risk that they will take decisions that don't benefit me and that I'm now in trouble, you know. So losing that choice, losing that empowerment. I mean, you can flip all of these and say, well, actually, the things we ought to focus on then is giving people certainty and fairness and status and autonomy. And that's what we're going to look at when we think about how we jumpstart our communications, because I've got these practical techniques to help you do that. Just put a 1 in the chat if you think I'm making sense so far, or put your thumbs up, either because you're on camera, or put a thumbs up signal. Just let me know. Yeah, okay, I can see loads of different people across the screen. I'm just trying to make sure I can see what's going on. Okay. All right, so I think we're getting the joke here that the thing that's really hit home to me, that runs throughout everything I do since I started studying neuroscience, is that the brain of my stakeholders is my stakeholder. It's their brain I need to communicate with. Nothing else. It's the brain. And we're going to look at how that plays out in just a moment. So we've talked about threat and reward. So the problem I've got is if I'm not careful, I'm creating these sort of messages that actually burn out, fight or flight or freeze. These are all things that we don't want. We want to move more to the right there, where peak performance. It's not right over onto the right with reward, because we can't keep going all the time. There's always going to be peaks and valleys. Yeah. I need to minimize how the brain sees the change as a threat to its very survival. And what I need to focus in on is I want to highlight rewards, advantages, opportunities. I want to give the brain certainty and status and fairness and autonomy, because that moves my brain into seeing the change as a reward, but also the way in which I'm being treated. I'm being treated with respect, and I'm being valued. I'm having an opportunity to co-create things and have my say. It shifts me towards all the positives. So when our brains are creating the chemical mix that we get when we react to something, so I will get the adrenaline, that powerful force when I'm threatened. I'll get the noradrenaline or epinephrine when I'm threatened, which makes me focus in on sort of coping with the thing. But when I'm in that reward space, I get that lovely feeling of dopamine, which is, oh, that's good, got that done. A sense of achievement, a sense of energy, I want to go and do more. Or oxytocin, that bonding feeling that I'm feeling with you now, because I can see you on screen. So I'm feeling, okay, I'm part of the group. I can see people, some at their keyboards, some are staring at me down the screen, some have got sunglasses on, manage, some of them haven't, you know, all of those sorts of things I can see. And I think, oh, I'm part of this group. So a very simple thing you want to do for any call that you're ever involved in is thinking about, well, hang on, how can I get oxytocin? Let's just put the screens on, shall we, and see each other. Let's be visible, because if we're visible to each other, then absolutely we can feel good. We're moving ourselves. We're always moving ourselves down towards the right-hand side, moving ourselves more to reward. So every time you do something that the brain likes, think about it as I'm actually giving the brain what it needs. Yeah. And that will give us a very, very positive reaction. So that's what we're looking for there. Okay. So I want to get us into facilitating change, being resilient, being creative, and that sense of well-being. So whenever I communicate with a stakeholder, I've got this in mind. I've said this in a couple of webinars. I'm going to say it again because I think it's so important. I'm not trying to rubbish the way in which we do stakeholder analysis. I mean, I've put up some basic analysis tools here. So based on your role in my change, are you a provider or supplier? Are you a customer? Are you in the governance role where you're a decision maker? I will send you messages. However, many of those messages, this is why I'm talking about jumpstart your communication. Many of those messages will just bounce off because what I'm doing is I'm telling you, you should be interested in this because your job title says that you cover this. That might not connect with somebody in that moment in the day because they're going, I'm too busy, this isn't relevant, I've got enough on, oh, don't ask me to do more. All of those threat responses. Similarly, what you're going to find is that when we look at, let me analyze you according to what interest you have in my change, or maybe what your power is, or maybe what the impact of the change is to you. Again, I'm creating those sort of messages, what you should be interested in, but a large proportion of those will bounce off. And that really, really concerns me. So what I'm trying to do with my engagement all the time is I'm trying to make sure that actually what I'm communicating will have that visceral response. It will trigger that, yes, I want to be a part of that. Yes, I want to take notice of it. So that's what I'm doing, okay? So I can make logical arguments, again, based on your job title, based on what level of impact you're getting in terms of the change, I can make that, but the problem is it'll bounce off. I can even tell you engaging stories. And you might listen and retain some of it, but some of it will bounce off. What I want to do, I'll bring in my logical arguments and I'll bring in my engaging stories. But you know what? I'm going to start with brain-friendly messages. I'm going to go to those visceral pieces. I want to reduce your pain. I want to increase your pleasure. I want to increase your autonomy, your certainty. I want to reduce the energy that your brain needs to process this change. So I want to minimize threat. I want to increase reward. So understanding how the brain works has a amazing impact on how we communicate. I certainly can see how things have changed for me in how I do things. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you a number of these techniques. If you've got any questions so far, put something in the chat and let me have a look, because I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. But my aim in using neuroscience, which I can't really go into much in sort of like a 55-minute teaching, is going to give you lots of sort of practical ideas, but everything's grounded in neuroscience, okay? You'll get a recording, but I don't send out the deck, Lee. But thanks for your question. You will get the recording and you can listen to this and you can play it to other people as well. Absolutely. Because there is a lot of richness in here. I'm passionate about my subject because I chaired the Change Management Institute for about 6 years. I now chair the Change Capability Community. I'm always thinking about what do we need to do as a profession. And I think over the last few years, what I've realized is that actually what I need to be far better at is brain smart communication, not just communicating because, oh, well, this is where we are in the life cycle of my change. So therefore, this is what people will be interested in. Because I think we all know they're not, right? That they're not interested in the things we're telling them they should be interested in. So this is why I go back to what we've got here is that the brain is the key stakeholder. So understanding how the brain works, understanding how our brains filter out certain information and maximize other pieces of information will change how you engage with people and how you run your change. But I can pretty much guarantee that your brain has very little interest in where you are in your change life cycle. So that's a starting point. So what I'm going to do, there's just let me have a quick look. Engagement is more than communication usually, but both terms are popping up here. Could you please just cover off how you're using both, Mel? Basically, what I'm doing is, yes, I'm communicating, I'm sending information, but what I'm wanting, Jenny, in terms of engagement is for it to have that reaction, for it to trigger a response. So when I design a communication, it is with the desired outcome of engagement. I am trying to trigger engagement, which is a reaction, which is for people to engage with it, do something with it. So you design your communication with the outcome of creating engagement. What I want, that engagement, is that visceral response in the brain. That's what I'm looking for, yeah? What have I got here? The one is group performers, they want to resist the change. It seems we can go both ways when we talk about community. Yeah, people will go both ways. We want to angle them towards not resisting, but to getting on board with change. Apologies if I've missed any more questions in the chat. I'll try and come back to them as I get towards the end of this. But let's give you some practical things and why the brain thinks these are the right things. So the thing is that our brains love certainty, yeah? And so we know often, and this is a very agile thing, isn't it? I know I need to do A. I know we need to do B. Not sure about C. There's a few different ways that we could go. Fantastic. That's a very full communication. That helpfully explains things. However, if you really want to hit home and get some action from a communication, think about actually talking about what now. It's about not asking people to imagine the next few steps, but think, what do we need to do now? Rather than, you can certainly put some context around, hey, we're going to do step A because we've got B coming up. That's all really useful stuff. But what you probably want to avoid is thinking too much about step C and all the possibilities of step C, for two reasons. First of all, it's so far out that you are draining the energy from the brain, because the brain has now got to think about A and B and all the possibilities for C, because our brains are constantly trying to work out, what am I going to do next and next and next and next? So if you introduce that and say we've got to do A and then B, then C could go these ways. So already my brain is trying to process and use energy to keep in mind. So it's got to try and hold on to B and all the possibilities for C. So when you're forming your communication, although it's tempting to write a bigger letter, it's a bit like Winston Churchill saying, I'm very sorry I didn't have time to write you a short note, because you put everything in there because you haven't got the time to edit out what's really important. What I'm saying from this is, give the brain what is really important. But if you clog it up with lots of other information, then you're asking the brain to really take on a lot of energy, and therefore your messages will get discarded. I get several hundred emails a day. So I'm at the top end of this, and I can tell you now that I look through stuff. And if it looks too big, I'm a nice person. If it looks too big, I think, oh, I tell you what, I'll go and make myself a cup of tea and have a bit of a read. When do I get that? Really? I have that. That's what my brain is saying. I'll be a nice person, go off and do that. But actually my brain's going, no, you haven't got time, move on. Yeah. So think about what content you're putting in there. Yeah. In terms of what now. This communication is because, we're back to Jenny's question about engagement. This communication is because I want you to engage. I want you to focus in. I want you to do something. I want you to tell somebody something. I want you to believe something about A. If you need a bit of reasoning why that's important, let me explain B to you, because it links into B. So it's an enabler for B. So let me give you a little bit of that, if that'll help you. But make it very clear that what you need people to do is A, and you need them to do it now. And then when that's done, you can send out another communication. So you're thinking all the time about what the brain, it doesn't want to use up the energy necessary for thinking about all these things. So what now rather than what's coming up next, because you have opened up all of this is where the real energy goes, because your brain is thinking about scenarios. It's already walking through lots of different scenarios to get you. So, oh, would it be C3 or C1? Which way should we go? You know, it's all of that sort of thing. Similarly, connected to this is, here are all the things. So I've got my full scale of the change there on the left-hand side. There are things, whichever life cycle model you want to use. We're going to do the start, the middle, the end. There's loads of different change activities in all of these pieces. So this is a huge amount of information for people to process. And actually, Lee asked in the chat, hey, have you got the slides? And I said, no, there's a recording. You can listen to it numerous times. Why? Because two reasons I've got that answer for you. I'm recording this so that you can listen to it again and again and again in your own time. When your brain is ready to accept that, you can stop the recording, you can go backwards and listen to things all over again. But it's because I know the one thing is I am trying to give you a very big picture right now. So I have to give you a mechanism by which you can go back over it and over it and over it, because there's I have to give you the big picture, but at the end of the day, I know that's going to take a lot of processing of information. I might choose to give you the big picture because you need that context, but then I make sure in my communication that I'm actually saying, I'm actually focusing on this bit. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't give people the bigger picture, but you need to highlight, this is the bigger picture. If you have time to read it, time to process it, time to engage with it. If not, this is the thing that we really need to focus in on right now. So thinking about all of that. Yeah. Which is also connected. You see, there's a lot of overlap here. Again, it's about minimizing the energy. What you don't want to do is spread people's energy. If I give you 4 things to think about, your brains are incredibly sort of fair. Let's put it that way. Right? The way in which they're fair is that it's all about, well, you've given me 4 things to think about, so I'm going to give each of those sort of 25% of my time. Okay, so thinking about that, I'm going to spread myself across all 4 messages. That's what you're doing. Now, if you've got 4 key messages that people really need to engage with, absolutely, then that's what you should do. Yeah. But if actually one of those is really relevant for their job, really relevant for something that they need to look at, then what you should be thinking about is, how do I do this? How do I just craft out the one message that's right for them? And I think understanding how the brain is incredibly fair can be very helpful, because if you just recognize that if you give me 4 pieces of information, my brain is going to try and spread my attention across all 4 things. If that's what you want, that's fine. But if you're doing that accidentally, now is the time to stop that. So think about what it is you need to do in a very practical way, because again, what we tend to do is we tend to have so much information in our own brains that when we write a communication, sometimes we're trying to get it all in there. So you might very well want to put it all in there, but then think about using some of the techniques I've already shown you. Think about, actually, I don't need them to see all 4. Actually, this one I really need them to focus in on. Or maybe there's a lot happening, but this is where we are. This is the one to focus in on. Or actually, this one here, hey, I'll give you A, I'll talk about B, but I'm not going to do all of the other possibilities that would take a lot of energy. So what I tend to do with my own emails, when I'm doing really important communications where I need people to do stuff that they weren't already doing, in other words, when I need my communications to really, really land, then I will apply my sort of pen. I'll print out the email and I will go back and I will ask myself some of these brain rules, because the more the neuroscience and the Agile Change Coach course is full of all these practical techniques and more. So I've put some new ones in here. There's 41 in the Agile Change Coach course that we go through, and applying all of those techniques really sharpens up what it is that I'm doing. So I will go back and apply this in very practical ways. Next thing, one of the things we talk about is perhaps this is not relevant for me. So the brain is using that filter of this isn't relevant. It's not relevant for my role, or it's not relevant for my workload right now. So where you want to capture people's engagement is to give them something relevant, to make them think, oh yeah, no, I need to take notice of this because. So if you're thinking that your messages are being, bouncing off people because they just can't see the why, think about whether or not you use a Kanban board or whether or not you're using more of a Gantt chart to represent all the workload. Create this and actually then highlight where on this the task you're talking about fits in. So very, very simply, you can actually show people, hey, this is part of an overarching picture of work. I'm not just asking you, for the tangent, because again, our brain is also thinking about certainty and how things fit together. So what you're showing me here is this fits into something. That's why I'm asking you. And the other thing that I could say about an awful lot of what I'm describing right now is that I've shown a picture using a visual. I'm very well aware that the brain will find the written word hard to process. There's an awful lot of information. When I read a word, words matter to the brain, because whenever we're looking at something, our brain brings in, again, its biases, its past experiences, its shortcuts. So certain words will trigger certain responses in me. So as I'm reading, there's the danger that not only are you asking me to put an awful lot of energy into what I'm reading, because I've got to process all of those words, but also that I will misinterpret what you meant, because I will put my own experience on a particular word, and it might be quite a negative experience of that word. You're putting in something about we're going to collaborate in this workshop. And actually, I'm seeing the word collaborate as, oh, good grief, I've got to hang about waiting for everybody to have their say before I have mine. You've no idea how I'm going to interpret the words. So you need to think about visuals being a far quicker way of getting across what you're saying. It's a low energy processing mechanism for the brain. The highest energy is what you're doing right now, which is listening to me, because as you listen, you're forming your own pictures in your head of what I'm saying. The lowest energy is smell, but the next lowest is visual. So give people a picture, make it simple. So you might want to provide a context based on workload. You might want to, again, we're trying to get to people's relevance here, to connect with them in a way that makes them go, yes, I want to be a part of that. Yes, I want to do that. So you can connect with them based on the relevance of other people. We're asking you to do this because maybe your peer group are also doing this. I've used a little picture here for very much covers just the peer group. It also maybe your bosses are doing this, or maybe other people outside your organization. So you could sort of say, hey, actually your competitors are doing this. This is what's going on. Yeah. So it's about understanding, what's really, really happening here, and thinking what would connect with these people. Yeah. I was talking to somebody the other day who really, really interested in what other organizations are doing. And it's had an amazing effect by bringing in that wider context. In other cases, of course, that talking about what other people further up or downstream in the same organization are doing would really hit home. So think about giving people a context that connects with them and their interests. And then finally, when thinking about trying to sort of communicate here, in that you want that connection back to not the workload now, but the specific task. This communication, how does this connect to other things you've been asked to do? How does this connect to maybe rumors and gossip? So what you're doing is you're making sure that this is relevant because you're connecting it to other things. This communication flows into other things. I asked you last week about this. This is how this fitted in, So you're acknowledging that perhaps you've communicated more than once. Yeah? So you're giving people the chance to think about, oh, there was another communication. If you're super smart, you'll put links into that other communication because some people won't have engaged, and this is an opportunity to get them another bite of the cherry and to get them back in. Yeah. So what you're looking for is, hey, it connects to things we've already been talking about. So there's a flow here, which also hits back to the idea, as far as the brain is concerned, of certainty. Oh, this connects to this, which connected to that. So it's all flowing along like a smooth river. So there's no decision for me to take here. I was already bought in a little bit over here, and now this connects to that. So it just flows in. So the brain is not trying to go, oh, is this different? Where's this coming from? Oh, I think I need to take a decision about whether this is relevant. And if, of course, there's rumours and gossip going on, you might acknowledge those as well and sort of say how this fits in to what it is that you're doing. I'm just going to have a quick look in the chat if I can. I can see people putting things in the chat, which is hard for me to do at the same time. I think somebody put in about, what about a sound-only interview with leaders? Those people really rate describing the vision very succinctly and clearly. Well, yeah, Jenny, what they're doing there is when you've got a sound-only interview, what you're finding is that they are exactly what you've just said. The reason that it is only sound, but what they've applied is some of the earlier things that we've already looked at. Because what you'll find that they're doing is they are succinct and clear, is what Jenny said. Well, yes, because you'll find that they're drawing your attention to this. They are maybe mentioning how it connects to something else, but they're not then wittering on for days about all the other things. Yeah. They're not going to go through every item line by line so that you've switched off after 5 minutes. They're going to grab your attention with this thing. Yeah? They're going to not pepper what they're saying. If they're succinct and they're clear, they're not peppering it with everything. So your brain is having to spread itself across everything. Instead, they're picking out the key things and using your brain power to focus on the things that you really need to see. So that's why those things work very well, because actually people are using what we're talking about here. How do you create the impact of a visual in an accessible way? You recently worked with a sight loss organisation, and this was very challenging. We used very short words and bullets, but any other hacks? I know, Emily, I think I know where you're working. When it comes to visuals, you're absolutely right. You want to make it so thinking, if you want to engage people that have other specific needs, or maybe a visual for somebody who's suffering sight loss is more challenging. But if you think about creating something that's made up of small pieces, and you can go, this connects to this piece, that connects to this piece, you can actually describe your visual very well. So if I had to describe this one, for example, I would say Melanie used an email template to demonstrate that she was sending out the email. You can see that I put latest change announcement, and she used the same template twice, once to show that there was a lot of information and the next to show that there was less information. So I think it's you, in other words, Emily, a short answer is you have to plan your visual and make sure that your visual sort of flows, if you like, that one thing adds value, yeah, and that it is actually very clear to people what it is you're trying to get across. I'm going to carry on because, as ever, time moves fast and we've only got a few more minutes and I want to do some more techniques. This is a great one in terms of autonomy, right? The autonomy piece is always going to be, I want to be in charge of my own destiny, because that way my brain is going, well, yeah, you're the one that protects you the most. So yeah, you want to be in charge of your own destiny. So autonomy is very important. In this, I might be trying to sort out how we're going to make our change happen. So I'm playing with the scale of our change. We've got an ERP system, and actually what that's going to do is that's going to link to our new production line. But I might be putting up some very high level pieces about the change, because what I'm doing is I respect your expertise. I am putting up something that is half finished or even just 10% there. And I am now inviting you to add things. Far more effective than a blank piece of paper where you're asking people to innovate and ideate from nothing. Actually, what you do is put something part completed in front of people, and then they can go, oh, we need to add that as well. So part completed, you're inviting people to go, well, what's missing? What is it that we can add in at this point? So that's really showing that you respect them. It's ask, don't tell. And therefore, you're giving people autonomy. You're giving them empowerment to get involved. Another one here that's really important in terms of not turning the brain off is we want to avoid mismatch. At any point that what my expectations are not met, then my brain is screaming, error, error. And it's screaming, that's a threat. It's not what it should be happening. So we're in a threat situation. So we want to make sure that what we're doing all the time is we're thinking about, well, this is the future expectation meets the future reality. Future expectation meets future reality. But then here, the future expectation doesn't meet the future reality, but it's a positive mismatch. There's a gain. Yeah. So people will be more open to change. You're talking about all the things that they hadn't expected, which are bonuses. But you have to be very careful about the one where the future expectation is met with a much poorer reality, a negative loss, a negative mismatch. So what does this tell me about how I communicate? Ask, don't tell. Really, before I communicate, I need to know what are people expecting. So whatever I'm doing, I'm asking questions. What do you think this means before I jump in with my own definition of what it means? So who do you think the stakeholders are on this initiative? Right, well then, let's add some more stakeholders based on, we've got this as a basic, this is what you're expecting. I think there are a few more. So, but you started with people's expectation. You honoured their expectation and their contribution. So think about how you can do that. And lastly, when it comes to certainty and the time frame, what we're doing here is what you want is some kind of roadmap. This is really brain smart stuff, a visual plan for a start. It's got all the decision points on the journey. It's got how long the chunks are on the journey. And there's a sort of simple, repeatable process. This comes in the Agile Change book, which talks about getting started, making progress and realizing benefits. Because when we do the Agile Change coach course, coaching you through loads of different techniques, it's got to be hung off of a sort of a simple plan for any change. And this is exactly what you want to be drawing for any of your changes, is a simple sort of journey planner, because then you're creating a sense of certainty, because this message screams, because you don't want to involve them in every part of it, but you're saying, we do have an end-to-end plan. You draw their attention to the bit you want to talk about, but what you have done is you've put out, we have got an end-to-end plan. We do know what we're talking about. It's going to be okay. So you're creating a sense of certainty. You're respecting people's time, because you're saying, I'm not going to go through every single piece of this. What I am going to do is reassure you, though, that we've planned this end to end. This is not, you're not doing something that may or may not fit into other things later on. No, everything we're doing fits in. I am not wasting your time. I respect your expertise. I respect the amount of pressure that you are under. So there's something here about how when we think about the brain wants to be valued and respected. If we are not valued, and then if our status is not valued, then we see that as a threat. So I know I've talked for ages and we're coming to the end. So the reason I speak so passionately is that I do believe that if you don't have all of these practical techniques in your toolkit, you are probably wasting quite a lot of time. You're probably frustrating your stakeholders and relying on their goodwill when you are in a crowded marketplace, because the changes you're involved in are only a tiny part of all the changes that they are experiencing. So using neuroscience, using these practical techniques to absolutely engage straight to their brain, where they want certainty, autonomy, they want respect, they want to be treated fairly, they want to maintain their status, they want to get to reward, not threat. These are the techniques you absolutely need. And as somebody who knows all the theories and models that we've been teaching in change for decades, the thing that I'm most interested in now is, have we got practical things we can do that speak to the brain as the stakeholder that make the real difference? So it's a passionate plea. The bank holiday weekend's coming up. So have a think about, what is it that you can do to think, do you know what? I really need to get behind all of this. Because I think I want us to be a profession. I want us to be really professional. So that's what I'm most interested in. So I hope you, if you haven't already, and I know Kerry was on the course and saying in the chat earlier on how brilliant she found. She's done both of these because they are really practical. And that's the feedback that I get all the time, is that this has made a difference. And it's about, when you leave my training, can you go away and do more than you could do before? Have you got an action plan as a result of my training? And that is why I do what I do. So I hope you'll join me sometime very soon. And if you want to email me because you want a discount, because you're going, hey Mel, I'm on this thing, I put the discount in there as well in the chat, but I would love to see you on a course anytime soon. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop the recording now, but if anybody else has got more questions for me in the thing, just let me know, okay? And I will try and answer them.